Ciao. Andrew here from glazertuning.com, and today I would like to teach you how to balance calcium hydroxide plus nitric acid yields calcium nitrate plus water. So the first step I like to do is just place in these little spacers in front of all the compounds. That will represent the location of where I can place my coefficients, And coefficients are just some numbers, okay? After that, I just want to keep in mind the general principle is that whatever's on the reactant side has to balance whatever on the product side. Okay, and then my last rule, which is really the all-important rule, is the first elements or polyatomic ions I'm going to work with are ones that I see both in the reactants and in the products identically across both sides. For example, calcium. First start with calcium. I have one calcium here, and it's only in this compound on the left. I have calcium here on the product side, and it's only in this compound on the right. I love to work with that. I love to balance that. I want to balance that first, okay? So I have one calcium, that's where the subscripts come into play, so they're balanced. I don't have to worry about it. The next thing I'm going to do then is move on to the next unit I see, and I look at this as a polyatomic ion. Now, you might look at this as oxygen and hydrogen separately, and that would be okay, but I really don't suggest you look at that at the start. All right, I really want you to keep the polyatomic ions together. Now, what happens here is I see a polyatomic ion hydroxide, and what I'm going to do is look for a polyatomic ion hydroxide on the right-hand side. I don't see it. Therefore, move on. Don't worry about it. Okay, we're going to skip it for now. We're going to come back and balance it later. The next thing I do then is I'm like, okay, well, I have hydrogen. Now, I don't want to work with hydrogen. Reason being is because hydrogen is in this compound and also in this compound on the reactant side. I don't want to work with elements that are in more than one compound on one side. So we skip it. The next thing to do is then to move on to the next polyatomic ion, nitrate. Now, this is why you have to know your polyatomic ions. You might look at this as nitrogen and oxygen separately, but through practice, you must know that that is a polyatomic ion. It'll save you a lot of time, trust me, with balancing. So polyatomic ion nitrate, I look to see I have one of them on the reactant side. And oh, look, I have the nitrate over here as well. I love that. One compound on the left, one compound on the right. Let's balance it, okay? So as I said, there's one on the left and there's going to be two on the right. So what I simply need to do is put a 2 here, okay? Nitrate's balanced. Now, let's go back. Okay. Now, the significance of this is the following. You see, sometimes it's tough to identify where this oxygen is. You might say, well, I have oxygen in this compound. I have oxygen in this compound. I got oxygen like everywhere. That really becomes hard to balance. But now what we've basically done is we said that this oxygen is basically sequestered with this nitrate. And this oxygen is basically sequestered with this nitrate. What that means now is that the oxygen all the way over here now matches up perfectly with this oxygen. You see, it becomes a lot easier now. So now I can easily balance those oxygens because I have oxygen here in one on the left and I have oxygen here in one on the right. I know I also have oxygen here and here, but remember they're part of the nitrate, polyatomic anion. So now all I need to do is simply balance the oxygens, okay? So here on this side, you have one oxygen in the hydroxide, but then there's a subscript of 2 on the outside. Remember, you multiply those two values together, so you get a total of 2 oxygens on the left. And for oxygen over here, there's only 1, so there's 1 oxygen on the right. So you have to place in a coefficient now of 2, right? You have to place in a coefficient of 2. So that will balance the oxygens. Okay, lovely. What's left now? The only thing that's left is really the hydrogens, right? We just want to make sure the hydrogens balance out, so check them out. You have now 2 hydrogens here. The reason being is because you have 1 hydrogen in the polyatomic anion hydroxide, but there's 2 hydroxides, right? So you got to multiply that to find the total amount of hydrogen. So there's 2 there. There's also going to be 2 coming from this nitric acid. Now remember, this hydrogen is not part of nitrate, so you can include it as part of nitrate. So you have now 2 hydrogens here. So 2 plus 2 is obviously going to be 4. And that better balance now with the amount of hydrogen I have on the right. So we have 2 hydrogen here, but you have a coefficient of 2. In other words, you have a water molecule. In each water molecule, there's 2 hydrogens, but you have 2 water molecules. So that means you have 4 hydrogens in total on the right. And everything now is balanced. And that's all it is. All right, that's all you need to have. Just 2 coefficients in there. 1 here and 1 there. Guys, thanks very much for tuning in. I really do hope this helps. It was a little bit of a challenging problem. Hopefully you followed it through. All right. And just keep in mind the principle. only work with one element at a time, and it only wants to be in one compound on the left, one compound on the right. Then go to your polyatomic ions. Only work with that in one compound on the left, one compound on the right. And then from there, you can start then going backwards and trying to fill in the missing pieces. Thanks so very much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. If you liked this video at all, I don't know, hit the like button. That'd help us out tremendously. And we appreciate your support. Thanks so very much. Take care.